6.3 square root functions and inequalities. What we're going to start off here is graphing, or what we're going to do this whole section is graphing square roots. And then we're going to have inequalities, and when we have inequalities, we have to shape. So first, if we look at this table, it says if a function contains the square root of a variable, it's called a square root function. The square root function is a type of radical function. So usually they want you to do a table, but what we're going to do is we're going to use our calculator, okay? There's no sense of using a table when you can get your table from your calculator. Remember, where you get it from is after you graph it into y equals. Then you would hit second graph, and that will get you the table of x and y values. Okay, so that's how you can get those tables. So the domain of the square root function is limited to the values for which the function is defined. So when it asks you for your domain, which that's what we're going to get to down here, what you're going to look at is you're going to look at the equation underneath the radical, and you're going to solve. So let's look at number one. It says identify the domain and the range. Right now we're just going to identify the domain. We'll identify the range in the other ones once we start looking at a graph. So here, in order to figure out the domain is, you're going to set the equation under the radical equal to 0 and solve. For example, 4x. So 4x, it has to be greater than or equal to 0. And then x is greater than or equal to 0. When you divide by 4, if you divide 4 by both sides, it's 0. Okay, so this has to be greater than 0. Remember, we don't want a negative number underneath there. Okay, again, we do not want a negative number underneath there. Okay, let's look at the next one. This one, x minus 5 is greater than or equal to 0. So x is greater than or equal to 5. Okay, any number greater than or equal to 5. It can be 0. You can have radical 0. That's fine, because that's just 0, right? If I plug 5 in here, 5 minus 5 equals 0. And radical 0 is okay, but you don't want a negative number. So all these we're finding right here, this is our domain. So when it asks for your domain, it'd be your domain is x. You write it like this, x such that x is greater than or equal to 0. This one here, your domain, x such that x is greater than or equal to 5. Okay, next, let's look at number 3. Now, number 3 has a whole bunch of other things in there. It has that -2, but we don't need to worry about the -2. We only need what's underneath the radical. X plus 8 is greater than or equal to 0. X is greater than or equal to -8. So your domain is x such that x is greater than or equal to -8. Again, a review, we've gone over this before. This line right here, this long, big line, means such that. You have to write it in this form every single time. All right, so let's look at the square root function. Now, this should look familiar. You should see stuff in here. H and K, right? H moves us left to right, and K moves us, or moves up and down. Remember, with H, you're going to take the opposite sign. Okay, and then the A is the reflection. Oops. Let's try that again. There we go. It's the reflection. Okay, so your vertex is always H comma K. That's our starting point. Okay, now our square root graphs, here's what's interesting. If you have an x squared graph, we know from review that that's a U. Okay, it's a parabola. Now, if you have a square root graph, that's half of the u, but the square root graphs look like this. So all square root graphs will either be going up, I call them an eyelash, or they'll be falling down this way. And depending on the reflection is which way it'll look, okay? This would be a positive square root. This would be a negative. It would look like negative square root x, okay? All right, so here we go. Our h for number 4 is 0 because there's nothing inside the radical, and our k is negative 2. So your starting point is 0, negative 2. So draw a quick graph. Okay, your vertex, your starting point is 0, negative 2. So 0, negative 2, it's right there. And then it goes up. Right now we don't have to worry about too many accurate points. I just want us to get used to drawing it. But our domain, remember, your domain is what's underneath the radical. Well, that's just x. So x such that x is greater than or equal to 0. Your range, remember your range, you move from bottom to top. So there's nothing that's going on down here at the bottom for the range until you get to negative 2. Negative 2 to positive infinity because this is going up. We skip negative 2, negative 1, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. It goes up and out. So that's your domain and range. All right. Number 5, we'll go over. We could look at number 5. Okay, let's go to number 5. We'll talk about our h and k, and then we'll use our calculator. So our h is 1 because you take the opposite. Your k is 0, so your vertex is 1, 0. Now we have this 3, and we're going to look at that 3 on using our calculator. So okay, our starting point here is 1, 0. So it's right there. Now, let's go to your calculator. And in your calculator, you're going to hit y equals at the top left. If there's anything there, you're going to clear it out. And then you're going to go to the first one, y1, and you're going to type 3. And then you're going to hit square root, which is second x squared. And you're going to type x minus 1 in there. Okay, so we're going to get some points here. Your graph, and here's where we're going to want definitely accurate points. Once you get your graph, if you go to second graph, after you type everything in your graph, if you go to second graph, you'll see an error. There's errors until you get to 1, 0. The next point after 1, 0 would be 2, 3. And if you don't understand this, I definitely need you to come to tutoring. So that next point, 2, 3, is I will make sure that it's graphed. And then from there, you can just connect those 2 dots. And there is my function. Okay, let's look at number 7 here. Number 7 is definitely something you want to practice using your calculator. We're not going to graph it right now. But number 7, because that's negative, your graph will be going downwards. Okay, it'll be going just down this way. This isn't going to be accurate. Your graph is going to look something like this. But again, just practice that on your calculator and make sure you can get a graph that's upside down. Okay, let's look at when you're having to write it from here. So we need the original equation, y equals a, x minus h plus k. All right, so the starting point, that vertex right there, is -2, 4. So they just gave you h and k. But now we do need to figure out what a is, and we can't necessarily say it's our slope by just counting our slope. So you are going to want to pull another point from your graph. Let's pull this point right here of 2, 6, and that's going to be my x and y. So if I plug in my x and y and my h and k, I'll be able to find a and finish off my problem. So here we go. Y, 6 equals a square root x, which is 2, minus h, which is a -2, plus k, which is 4. So this gets us 6 equals a square root 2 plus 2 is 4, plus 4. Square root of 4 is 2. So 6 equals 2a plus 4. And solve like a regular algebraic equation. 2a is equal to 2, so a is equal to 1. Now we can come back up here, use the a is equal to 1, and plug it in to get our answer. So here's our answer. Y equals 1 square root x minus h minus a -2 plus k, which is 4. So y equals 1 absolute value, I'm sorry, not absolute value, square root x plus 2 plus 4. There's my answer. All right, let's look at, we'll go over word problems in class. Let's look at when we have to have an inequality. Now, anytime you see an inequality, let me erase this. When you see an inequality, you can think, I need to shade, right? You're shading our graphs. So, greater than or less than, you have a dotted line because there is no equal to sign. Greater than or equal to, less than or equal to, solid line. Greater than or equal to, you shade above. Less than or equal to, you shade below. Okay, so same steps below. You need to find your h and your k. So my h here is 0, my k is 4. My starting point, my vertex is 0, 4. Okay, use your calculator to plug that in to get the second accurate point for me. We'll just stay consistent on that. So if our starting point is 0, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, it starts right there. That next point is 1, 5, so you're there. Now, let's look at our inequality. Greater than or equal to, we have a solid line. Y is greater than, so you shade above the line. So it should look something like that. Let's try one more. We'll try number 10. All right, for number, actually, let's do one that's upside down. Let's do 11. So, h, take the opposite of h, -3. K is 0. So my starting point is -3, 0. Draw your graph. All right, -3, 0. So we're right here. We're going to use our calculator to figure out that second point. So you're going to type in your calculator, go to y equals. Okay, then go to y1 and type that equation in. -2 square root x plus 3. You're going to graph it. Okay, like I said, get that next point. I did a whole one, so the next point I'm going to pull out is 1, -4. So 1, -4. And, okay, it's less than, so we need a dotted line. and then you're going to shade below the line, which is down here. Okay, and that's my answer. And that's the lecture for 6.3.